Hello, everybody. My name is Ian Kirkpatrick. I'm an author, idiot, and loin streamer. And today I kind of want to present what I'm thinking and then get your guys' thoughts on it. As is typical with everything that I say, it is either just like my observations or me trying to share the things that I see or the things that I think or the way that I think to sort of start a conversation. I don't necessarily think that I am right or that I am trying to kick anybody into having the opinions that I have or to see things the way that I see them. But I think the way that we get to a better place in general is to express and exchange the different opinions that we have on different things. And I have very much come to a place of like, you're never going to convince anybody of anything that they don't want to believe. Like, really. You can be like, this is the most clear cut case of anything, but you're still never going to be able to convince somebody of something if they don't want to see it. So, if they don't want to see it that way. So, all we can do is exchange thoughts and try to understand why people think the way they think. And for the most part, try to respect differences of opinions, differences of approaches, assuming somebody isn't coming from a place of trying to specifically be destructive of something else in an actually violent way. I mean, you get into freaking talking about anything. I cannot tell you how many times I'm like, these are the specific guidelines. No messing around. I'm giving you these specific definitions so you know that it's not a trick. These are the definitions we're using. And people still go, well, what do you mean by that? Like, I think the most that it's hurt has been saying, do you disagree with CP? Do you think that CP should be censored? This is the definition of censorship. This is the definition of CP. And you still get people going, well, what do you mean by that? Because some people will define CP. I don't care what some people define CP as. This is the question with the definition. And then people act like, well, you've given me the definition to try to lock me in and trick me into this. No, I'm giving you a definition so I cannot trick you. So there is no to pull the blind away. But even in clear-cut cases when you're like, we should be able to agree on this, we can't. So I am just trying to start a conversation in general. And I know that there are going to be disagreements on this because I've seen them in the comments section over on my polls where I've asked polls that sort of relate to this. And I've seen the conversations that happen. And I also, before we get into this, I want to thank everybody who does participate in the community tab polls because the answers are always interesting to me. And the whole point is, I know that some of them, I know that all of them can have pretty locked in answers for the polls. Obviously, there are only so many options that I can put in there. But I also mean to encourage discussion. So while there are somewhat limited answers, if it encourages you or if it encourages discussion, if it encourages to leave a comment to further describe the thing, then that really helps for me in the discussion of seeing how people think and how people process information. And so I want to thank everybody who does participate in those and does share their thoughts because I think it is invaluable to hear from and allow people to hear their thoughts. And it can be really, really hard in general because sometimes you feel like when you're hearing from other people that have a different perspective, it can feel like they're disagreeing with you when it's actually just them existing. Okay, right? And then in other times, it can be very difficult to get responses in general because everything has been so polarized that just sharing your opinion turns into an attack on somebody or where you get attacked for having an opinion and sharing your opinion. Often it can feel very unwelcoming to share. And I know that I am trying to reteach myself how to absorb other people's responses to things without feeling personally attacked because it is hard. Sometimes it is like, coming at you aggressively because some people do see that difference and then go, I need to correct you. But it doesn't have to be that way. So that is what this is. I have already made this intro like way longer than I meant for it to be. But today's thing is going to be on kind of a subject that has been asked about on the community tab. So I want to present it here, especially with Colleen Hoover's new book turned into a movie as the springboard, because there was an interesting part that Reads with Cindy had at the end of her video talking about Colleen Hoover's book. And I want to use that as a springboard to the conversation as well. But before we get started, number one, if you enjoy what I do here on the channel, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Number two, if you would like to be featured on the channel, check out the links down in the description below. The number one way to be featured is through Lemoy, the monthly prompt writing contest where I give you a prompt, you write a short story using that prompt, and on the first Monday of the month, we bask in the creativity of the people that are so brave enough to send stuff in because let me tell you, It is not easy to experience other people reading your work in real time. We've had a couple of people show up to the Loin stream and who have had their work read, like T. Alex, like Cliff. I think his last name started with an H. I'm sorry, I cannot remember. That book was so long ago. Like Robert, the Low End Kids author, came a couple of times. And then Vladimir, the author of Order of the Spirit. And having people live react, live read your work, hearing your work said, and knowing that stuff might be said off the cuff or, your work might be played with or not well received. I listened to the VA who did Dead End Drive live read a couple parts when he was recording it, and you never know how the audience is going to respond, okay? I hope for the best when people read my work, but you honestly never know, and I mostly expect people to absolutely despise what I do. But I love what I do when it's done. Right now, I don't love what I do, but I love the ideas of what I do. Anyway, with that said, I know that it is difficult, and it is brave, I think, to put yourself out there, your stuff out there, to be judged, to be read live, to hang out in the chat while it's premiering. So thank you. With the second way to be featured here is through the Fresh Meat feature, where if you submit your cover and your first chapter, it'll be read here on the channel. The first chapter will be read here on the channel to hopefully help more readers find your work. That is the best way that I can think of to try to spread the awareness on the channel without my opinions involved and without my preferences involved. So then, like, my preferences will be involved in me picking stuff out of that after I read the first chapter, but that's pretty much it. The third thing is, if you would like to check out any of my books, they're available at any of your favorite places to get books, including the local library upon request. My newest novel, Bodymore Zero, is coming out in October, and it features these two gentlemen over here, these brothers. They are wonderful, and it is a story about found family and brotherhood and forgiveness and redemption, and ghosts. Casey is brutal. With that said, let's get into the topic. Colleen Hoover. As if there's not enough drama all the time regarding Colleen Hoover, who is one of the most popular, if not the most popular, contemporary writer right now, because she is constantly at the top of best-selling books. I think she tops with like 5 or 6 different of her books at the top of things. We're not going to talk about any controversy that has to do with her. We're just going to use her book, It Ends With Us, as a jumping board for this topic because it is an interesting topic to discuss in general. So the thing with It Ends With Us, and if you're not familiar with the book, is it is a boy meets girl situation where the girl ends up in this abusive relationship where she doesn't realize that it is an abusive relationship. Her parents were in an abusive relationship, and she swore that she would never get into the same situation as her mother. However, she ends up in this relationship with this guy who is abusive, and eventually she realizes it and breaks that cycle and breaks up with that man, and then has her daughter, because she does get pregnant in the story. Oh, by the way, I should say spoiler alert, but if you're here, it's too late. It's too late. So she ends up having his baby. And then at the end, in the epilogue, she also insinuates or states that she allows the baby to be around and to have a relationship with the father of the baby, who was her abusive husband at one point. And that is a point of contention for some people, as a point of criticism for some people. And that goes to the video from Cindy Reads. And Cindy is hilarious, okay? Sometimes I watch her stuff. She is hilarious. I thought that she did her video on It Ends With Us was very fun, very interesting. It was hilarious, okay? But at the end of it, she said something about how she didn't like that Colleen Hoover in the book had allowed the physically abusive man to have a relationship with the daughter and how that was dangerous. And there is a message at the end, an author's note at the end of It Ends With Us, that is from Colleen Hoover herself, helping to frame how the book came into the form that it was in, which includes that she says how it was her personal story. It was a story kind of inspired by her parents' relationship and how she had a relationship with her father, despite her father being abusive to her mother. And so then that's why she included that in the epilogue with the abusive father having a relationship with the child. And so then there has become conversations around this of some people saying that that experience should not have been written about. That it is irresponsible to put a man who has been physically abusive in a position that he can be around the child because he could abuse the child, and to act like it is going to be okay.
But I do think that it depicts abuse in a more compartmentalized way. I don't think it's the right way to view someone who is abusive. Maybe it's less about romanticizing abuse and more so about romanticizing reconciling with the abuser, because you see how she is still able to have a healthy relationship with the guy now that she's divorced him and they're just gonna be co-parents. I just don't think it is that simple. I feel like in terms of the stuff that Lily was going through in her head and how she felt really trapped in the relationship and how it took a while for her to get out, Colleen Hoover was able to do that right. But on the flip side, I think any kind of explanation for the abuser or why he is doing this or how his mind works or how he has earned forgiveness and reconciliation, I think that part is not right. So that would be my critique of the book. I don't care about the Finding Nemo references. I don't care about the shitty writing. It's really just the fact that I don't think a fucking baby should be alone with this guy. And I don't think that abuse should be described as his worst moments, his bad days, or any kind of language like that, because it makes it seem like abuse is compartmentalized and separated from the rest of his life, and that this is just a small little defect.
So that comes into a place where this idea of what is the responsibility of the writer who is writing a story. And for me, when I'm listening to someone say, you can't write about that because it is irresponsible to write about that and to insinuate that you can have that relationship, while I can say that I understand that perspective and that a lot of abusers never actually stop abusing and that it is a dangerous situation for a child to be put in, if Colleen Hoover is writing inspired based on the experiences that she has, I feel like as a commentator, it is inappropriate to invalidate somebody else's experience. Like, all memes aside on the word invalidate and validate, to say you can't write that even though that was your experience because it is dangerous for other people seems wrong. Like, I'm not gonna tell, I might not like that somebody wrote something. I have some opinions. I have some huge opinions, and I might be like, burn it. I freaking hate this. Look, we talked about Judy Blume on Thursday. I might freaking hate it. Same with Tampa when I'm like, how did this get published? That's more like, how does HarperCollins justify not picking up other books, but then they're going to publish this low-tier fanfic fictionalized CP? Like, that's more where that comes from. I might not like it. I might have strong opinions on something, but also to go to a further step and just say you shouldn't ever write this because it is irresponsible for you to write this, even if that is your experience. I don't know, it crosses some lines. And in the same way that it's like somebody might write something that is then considered a stereotypical situation, and then they're told, you shouldn't write that because then that makes whatever look bad. You shouldn't write this single fatherhood being abusive because it looks bad to men. And so you shouldn't write this female acting in this manner because it looks bad to women. You shouldn't write this religion being acting like this or it looks bad to this religion. And it's like, but what if that was my experience? There was one thing that I covered ages ago that had to do with sensitivity readers, where this one woman wrote her experiences as a Muslim woman and had put experiences and had written something that was critical of the Muslims, that was a bad experience, and it was inspired by her experiences. But then she had a sensitivity reader who said that she shouldn't write that because it made Muslims look bad and that her experiences as a Muslim didn't look like that. And so, like, how do you grasp with saying, well, I don't think you should do that because it makes people look bad. It might give people the wrong impression, but you're sharing your human story. That is always the thing, is I have seen more than a few books, and this goes into the freaking Judy Blume book, where it's like assuming that it is the job of some book to give lessons to the reader. And like, I think that a book can inspire and can influence or can inform the reader, but I don't think it has to. And I don't necessarily think that it is a book's job to have a lesson for the reader. while it can have a lesson for the reader, or it can expose the reader to an experience that they may never have and they will never have, but it can give perspective and inform. So like when I read Bret Easton Ellis books, I'm getting his perspective on the yuppie culture that he grew up in, on the California culture that he grew up in. You get it in the way that he views people, in the way he describes people, especially in the books that say they are autobiographical or semi-autobiographical. You're getting closer to who he is. In my books, you're going to get an idea of some of my voices or the way that I see things, and that often comes in the form of exaggeration. That often comes in the way that I express love. And that also comes in the way that, like, every central character that I write, there is some level of alienation in how alienation is explored. A lot of what I write also explores the ideas of how the people around us, the communities, our families, influence the decisions we make and how we see the world. That's one of my favorite things about these guys over here, is you really get to see how they make decisions and why they operate the way that they do. And it's not that you don't get to see that with Joey. You get to see that with Joey. But I think it's a different level with these two. And that's one of the things that I really love. You even see it in Dead End Drive. And so this goes back to the idea, and there was some in the comments of one of the polls previously where I asked if a book has to have a lesson in it. It must have a lesson or something like that. And it's like, for me, it can have a lesson or a theme or a takeaway or exploration of something, but I don't think that it has to. And I think that when you're exploring ideas or exploring philosophies or exploring specifically experiences and traumatic experiences or borderline experiences, and you want to show people things that they may not necessarily see, you're going to hit situations that are more questionable, that are more difficult, that are more uncomfortable and even more nuanced, that you may be like, oh, screw this. Like, you can throw most of your types of cheating books at me and you're not going to get me to agree, but I'm just there for the experience to see what it is that you're showing me. But so that's where it comes from. The Colleen Hoover is saying, what do you feel about a book that at the end of the book, it has a physical abuser, somebody that did beat his wife, having a relationship with his daughter and being allowed to be alone with his daughter? And for one, you put that in a book and you go, okay, I don't like this in this book. That's one thing. Have whatever expressions you want, have whatever responses you want. But taking that a step further, saying, I think that it is irresponsible for Colleen Hoover to do this, even if it is Colleen Hoover's experience. What are your feelings on that? Is there a limit? And what do you consider responsible or irresponsible writing, if anything at all? Personally, my irritation with irresponsible writing comes in the form of pornography, but I don't know if we're going to get into that today. I do think that there are different types of fiction, different purposes for a fiction to be created. And sometimes I think people forget that when they're looking at fiction and then kind of shove them all together. I'm going to get to those in a little bit, but I did want to talk about lesson versus theme versus takeaway versus exploration. And then there's stuff that is just like fun escapism. And that's something that I've talked about previously before too. It's also a poll, which was like, do you prefer escapism or do you prefer more grounded realism with exploration? And if I look at a book like We Need to Talk About Kevin, which has been one of my favorite books to read this year, that was the exploration of Eva's character, who has this fear of having kids to the point that she hates her son, and she puts all of the blame of everything bad that she feels and that goes on in her life on that child, even before he is born. When he is still in the womb, she is blaming everything on him. When he is an infant, she looks at the way that he cries and it's malicious. She looks at the way he doesn't cry and it's malicious. She looks at the way he talks to her and it's malicious. She looks at the way that he doesn't use the bathroom and it's malicious. She looks at the way that he does use the bathroom after she breaks his arm and she's like, it's malicious. This 4-year-old is trying to control me. You just broke his arm for not using a toilet. What do you think is going to happen? But that is an exploration of Eva as a character, and you're not necessarily going to like her. I mean, maybe you will. Maybe you'll empathize with her because you got different people that'll read different things. I hated Eva for pretty much most of the book, but you don't have to like her. She is an interesting character to me, and following the way that she interprets and deals with the grief of what has happened to her family, leading up to her trying to reconcile like what all happened and recounting, like you can see the way that her mind works if that is what you're paying attention to. But that book is not meant to be a lesson of anything. It's meant to be an exploration and a commentary, and to show you this experience that you may never have, this voice of this character, this background that you may never have because you are not the type of person that Eva is. And that's what makes it so interesting, at least for me. The same is with My Dark Vanessa, which was another book that I really enjoyed on this channel, to the point that it has inspired a book from me. But I digress. But My Dark Vanessa is another story that's about showing an experience and to follow this character. And it doesn't have a judgment. It's not meant to try to teach you something. It just lets you peek in the window on this girl, Vanessa, and the situation she goes into with her teacher, and what it looks like after the fact and during the fact, and how she interprets it both after and during, to the point that some people, some readers, accused this author of romanticizing an abusive relationship or a predatory relationship, and the author felt the need to come out and say it was inspired by my own experiences because it didn't condemn one thing or another enough. But if you're going through those experiences and you're just trying to show an experience, then it is not necessarily going to finger wag at you that it is good or bad. Another would be Shadow of the Conqueror, where it attempts, this is actually a book that tries to have a takeaway, I would say, or a lesson, where it is more of a story trying to talk about redemption, and can the worst of the worst be redeemed, and what does that look like? Now, I don't think that the book did it successfully, but that is the intent that I feel like is behind it. And as opposed to being a book about character, I also think that it does one of the things that makes it not work is not only is it trying to be a book with a lesson or a takeaway theme, like redemption, but it also tries to be a power fantasy / escapism, which you really can't mix together. Because if you're going to do escapism, complete escapism, then your character is always going to come out on top. Your character is always going to be right, because it's always just about having that badass that wins. Then you've got books like Tampa, which the author says that it is about making a message about the double standard between sexual abuse of women to boys as opposed to men to girls. But it also just sexualizes the whole thing. And some people will say that, well, that is the point, that also pushes it home. While other people say, especially the author, saying that she made the character so extreme to be unrealistic because she didn't want people to empathize with that character. But then you have also the author saying that it is meant to be empowering to women because sex is empowering, but then the character is also abusing children. So it's kind of like the messages get mixed, but that is a book that is also meant to be for the theme, because it is a specific response to something that the author said that she saw in society and wanted to write a book on, to opine on and bring attention to. Then you have Amygdala, which is a book by Sam Fenna, and that is also a book that is not about the characters. It's not about a lesson, but it is about the philosophy. It is a book that wants to show you the ideas of this animalistic society, and a society that is run by the survival more of the strongest, and how helping people is weak is what comes across it. There are ways that I use to usually determine if something falls into like character-driven, plot-driven, theme-driven, or philosophy-driven, or entertainment-driven. And that takes me to ACOTAR or Fourth Wing, where both of those are power fantasy, because you might start out in ACOTAR, A Court of Thorns and Roses, which is supposed to be a Beauty and the Beast retelling, but the Beast is not actually a beast. He's a freaking hot fae with an 8-pack. So you're not even dealing with, I'm so scared of him. You just have Feyre having every one of her whims and wishes being taken care of in this mansion with this slightly brooding king, because, you know, he's suppressed and his kingdom is under control and he is trying to make this thing happen. And this chick just murdered his best friend. I don't even know who the Beast is, because this chick murdered a friend of his, but whatever. So that's trying to be that, but it's not even a theme based anymore, because it is just a fairy tale. And by fairy tale, I mean a wish fulfillment dream where she is strong and she gets all the hotties and she never loses. And even the strongest fae in the world lose to this woman. And then she becomes a fae goddess with all of the fae powers, and then gets pulled into this thing and everybody wants her. And it's wish fulfillment. And the same with Fourth Wing. And so far, so I just finished Iron Flame. Blame Alex. I'm going to need reimbursement for that. But Fourth Wing, the closest that I can get at the moment, because it's supposed to be a 5-book series. It's wish fulfillment. The character in it gets everything that she wants. She is the strongest. She double fists pickles. She's mukbanging in her room all the freaking time. They're supposed to be at war, but it's more like they're at freaking summer camp at college. They forget that they're at war all the time. They're called to their battle stations in the middle of war, and instead they're mukbanging in the back room because screw being the most powerful, necessary ones on the battlefield. Am I right? Everyone can just die while you stuff your face with Hot Pockets. But if it wanted to, slightly, if it wanted to have a theme, the theme that I could see in it is military corruption or the corruption of the military-industrial complex. And that comes also not just from it being around the military and the military obviously lying, or the kingdom lying to the military about what their purpose is, but also because the author's husband was in the military and is a retired vet. And so then that might play a role in the perspective of the author and then pull into the theme, but the theme is ultimately just going to be power fantasy, a lot like Shadow of the Conqueror, where if you had a theme, it's going to be overshadowed by the power fantasy of the story. Now, if you're looking at stuff like Colleen Hoover's It Ends With Us, and then having that thing where it shows the abusive relationship in the end, and the cycle of abuse ends, but she does allow her ex-husband to have a relationship with their daughter, would you consider that irresponsible because you're letting this bad man character have a chance at being trusted? Would you consider, and we need to talk about Kevin, how Ava at the end of it says that she is waiting for her son to be released from jail after he has killed 10 people in a school shooting, including her husband and her daughter. She has a bed for him if he gets out, when he gets out, if he wants to move in. Would you consider that irresponsible because she is giving a chance to a mass killer? In My Dark Vanessa, would you consider that irresponsible? Because Vanessa never straight up says that Mr. Strain was wrong, that her relationship with Mr. Strain was wrong. You have to more read into what is happening in the scenario to see how she is responding, how she is coping, which often happens with abuse victims who oversympathize with their abusers. That's also been one of the interesting things in watching discourse in general, because I see people come out in different situations of having been groomed as children or teenagers, having been abused as children or teenagers, and then the person who groomed them is under attack, and that person, that child that is now an adult, hasn't really come face to face with what happened to them, which is work on its own, and they get attacked for defending their abuser when no duh they're going to defend their abuser if they haven't been through the recognizing what happened to them. That's part of grooming. But I have seen so many victims of grooming be blamed and be attacked for not recognizing what they've been through after it's been brought out who they were with, or what happened to them. And it is obnoxious, to say the least, disheartening, is they want to say, I see these conversations going on and on about like wanting to protect kids from abusers, but then when it comes out that they've discovered somebody, they just try to use that person as a bludgeoning tool to get them to say what they want them to say, and if they don't, then they attack that person for being a tool of the abuser. It's just annoying. It's just annoying. It doesn't help the actual conversations. With Shadow of the Conqueror, would you consider that to be irresponsible and a dangerous book because of the ideas within it, because of the scene at the end, because of it rewarding the women who had the rapist's children versus the ones who didn't, for the way that it treats Dalen when he is killing people, because he is obviously born of the light, so everything he does is well-intentioned, but other people are just born evil and they deserve to die? Would you consider Tampa to be irresponsible and wrong because of the way that it sexualizes children the entire way through and over-sexualizes them in the descriptions, but while it is trying to prove the double standard of sexualizing young men is okay? Would you consider Amygdala to be irresponsible in the way that it is written, where it is saying that you should just cull the weak, and if they can't survive, then they deserve to die? Where is that line of irresponsible should pay or this is just like poorly written and I don't like it for whatever reason. That's anything. Now, there are the different types of fiction that I mentioned before that I think people need to keep in mind when they're looking at different types of fiction. And it's, is it trying to be entertainment driven? Is it philosophically driven? Are we exploring philosophy generally? The freaking nihilism fiction is all philosophy driven. That is like, it's all pointless. And let me show you why it is pointless as we go into nihilism. The politically driven fiction, like The Hate You Give, where it is presenting this politically charged situation that relates to real life to try to push the envelope on something, or reactionary slash in protest fiction, which I would also put into that. The people who see what is in modern media that they do not like and they go, well, if you're going to make strong woman fiction, then I'm going to make bimbo hottie fiction where the man is the super jock and the woman wants to be trad, and it is in reaction to what is popular. Or the product slash trend chasing fiction, which follows the pattern. You know, you've got the save the cat look, you've got the this is what is typical of a romance genre, this is what's typical of a thriller, and you just mass produce it in that style. Or you're like Akatar, which then you throw the one Akatar rock into the lake and it ripples into 1.5 million freaking fairy tales of the exact same thing over and over and over again until we die in the next one. You have the artistic expression, where it is an artist who sees something, who has experienced something, and they're trying to capture an experience and present it to you the best way that they know how. I have recently started listening to Ren, or I found Ren a couple of months ago, the musician that's here on YouTube, and I listen to his music, and it is entirely artistry. It is entirely about wanting to express an experience, tell a story, to try to get other people to understand these experiences that others may not have, or to show people that he also feels what they have felt. It is an expression of an experience. Then you have the learning or the personal writing, which I think a lot of people end up publishing their personal stuff right now to their own detriment, because they start out early, they start out wanting to get stuff out as fast as possible rather than trying to learn the trades, the tool of the trades, how to even do sentence structures correct. They don't want to learn all of that. They just want to build a quick and easy backing for themselves, to get validation, to get praise from people, to get a big name for themselves from writing. And so they put stuff on Wattpad, they put stuff on Amazon Villa, they put first drafts on freaking Amazon Kindle Unlimited, and they just throw it all out there while they are learning. And I think it is to your detriment to do that, but it does happen. And then there's also therapeutic slash confessionary stuff, where people might take semi-autobiographical or autobiographical stuff like the Small Backs of Children, or the Shards. Small Backs of Children, I hear, has a lot of Lydia, I think it's by Lydia Yasovic was her name. And apparently it has a lot of similarities to one of her other books, because the Small Backs of Children is specifically inspired by experiences that she had, and then she fictionalized it into this book, and I had to read that book for graduate school at some point. The Shards is also an autobiographical book by Bret Easton Ellis that also includes true stories of crime that were happening at that time and mixes it with something else. But the main character of that is called Bret Easton Ellis, and he does insert his experiences in there in other fictional concepts and mixes them all together. And so those become therapy, where you're writing your experiences, you're trying to write your emotions and kind of show what you're going through, or confess what you've gone through, as a way of not just sharing it with the world, but expelling it from your body. And these might be able to be done at the same time, but not necessarily. I don't think you're necessarily ever mixing all of them together either. But they exist. And I think by assuming all books fall into the same category, you run into the issue of trying to understand or justify, well, why is this in here when this is considered irresponsible? You can't write this. I don't like this. But you're not necessarily supposed to like that character. It's not a self-insert fiction that you're supposed to enjoy via winning everything, you know? So I want to ask you at the end of all of this, I know the videos has kind of been everywhere. So here are the final thoughts. What do you think is the responsibility of an artist? What do you think is the responsibility of a producer? What do you think is the responsibility of a company? And what is the difference of these three things? A while ago, I got into a conversation with somebody else, and it was about the new Fable game. This is so long ago at this point, where I was talking about how you don't have to like what they do, but you're not part of their creative team. So what you say really doesn't matter unless they ask you for feedback. What they're looking for, the creative team behind the Fable game, because there are writers in the story. There are writers in there are creators and artists that are in the character design. There are writers and creators that are putting themes in there and everything. Because it is a game that is more written and has storytelling involvement in it. Not all stories really have the heavy storytelling involvement, but let's not pretend Streets of Rogue has the same amount of storytelling as freaking Death Stranding. We've got a spectrum here, okay? But I remember arguing that you're not part of that creative team. And so while you can have opinions, obviously, your opinions don't really matter to the creative team because you're not part of it. And the person kept ignoring that until he goes, oh, wait, so you're looking at this as an indie author where you're in control of everything. Well, I'm a customer, and there are other people that are involved behind the customering of this book, of this video game, that have a say in it, and we have a say over the company. So it was then this difference of like fans determine this thing because they're talking about a company and they're depersoning the people behind the work that is producing the game. And so then that's why I make a difference between artist, producer, and company. Like, are they the same thing? Are they not the same thing? Do you believe that an artist or a writer has a responsibility to the readers? And what do you think the responsibility is of the creator slash artist slash company? I know that everybody is going to have different opinions on this. My opinions on this have actually been shifting over the last couple of months, over the last year or two, actually, probably, from looking at different responses in the creative sphere. Personally, and this will be a video in the future because I've got other things for this, but I have been fighting against creative tyranny since the time that I became publicly involved with creativity, like by going to college and working in theater and then starting to pursue writing and seeing all of that. Is I might not like stuff, I might have opinions about stuff, but it's not the same as trying to cancel somebody for deciding that they wrote something incorrectly, that they don't deserve to be heard, that they don't deserve to have their writing exist, that they don't deserve to have their thing exist because you don't particularly like it. And I have seen this encroaching inflexibility going on that has been, I'm going to judge you on this thing that you haven't even released yet because you're not making it specifically for me. Is, oh, you're the creative writer of this thing? Well, you're not allowed to change the main character of the story because I like the other main character. And so then, obviously, you know, with Body More Zero having a different main character than 1 through 3, I'm like, well, oh no, it's okay when you do it, but not when they do it. Why can't they have control over their creative projects? Like, you don't have to like the project, but to see this mountain of people on all sorts of sides. This side saying it's not diverse enough, so you need to be canceled. This side saying, I don't like that you change stuff, so you need to be canceled. Don't even get me started on how people keep calling panty shots freaking thematically relevant or character development. Anyway, that's a thing for another time. I've just seen this complete inflexibility and this demand from creatives from both sides. And you know what? I might be judgmental. I might have my own personal taste biases. We all do. I will be honest about them, and that my tastes are specific and do not define anybody else's. I will only judge what is out there and what I have actually experienced. I try not to comment on stuff that I have not looked into or experienced for myself. And I encourage other people to look into what they are interested in as well. But that is a topic for another day. Though I do want to ask you, have you seen an increasing inflexibility or an increasing bias or aggression at creatives to work in a certain way? That's probably as far as I want to ask that question. And then what do you think the responsibilities of artists are? What do you also think the responsibilities or boundaries are for people who enjoy the content somebody else has created? Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments down below. Like I said, I expect the comments to be spicy. I expect to be disagreed with, which is fine. I just have opinions, but I can definitely say that if I'm insulted just for being a dum-dum and asking, that's not a good way to change my mind. Anyway, with that said, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk at you for 30 minutes. Have a good weekend and don't die.
Was that Wayland Cross in the trunk? Do you know, or is that something that's still being figured out? The person in the trunk was not Wayland Cross. Is he in trouble? We don't know who did it, but as the owner of the car, the longer he's missing, the worse it looks for him. Cross isn't a killer. For the last couple of years, the average number of murders in Baltimore has been over 300, and it's been going up. Mind you, that's only whatever the badges count as official murder, and believe me, there are people that don't count when they die. Wayland? If you're down here, tell me. I'm not talking to the badges, I've been looking for you. They found a body in your trunk. Way. Why? Did you do that? To the left, plain black letters read along the wall. You walked in the corridor. Once that ends, you chose the dark is on the right. My vision goes blurry, flickers black and black and black for longer intervals until I can't see anything at all. I'm not screaming anymore, but my voice echoes back to me. Where the hell am I? You're dead, Josephine. Even smart people do stupid shit sometimes, right?